The Golden Spike Chapter of the Railway and Locomotive Historical Society presents a retrospective and progress report on the restoration of Denver and Rio Grande Western narrow gauge steam locomotive number 223. 223 would have been built by the Baldwin Locomotive Company, but due to excessive workload, they contracted with the Grant Locomotive Works of Paterson, New Jersey to manufacture 223. It is a Class C16 consolidated 280. Those working on this restoration project are volunteers. We range in age from 16 to the high 80s. The number varies from year to year. Some have been on since the beginning, but others will join in for a while, then drift away. Tragically, some have died and are greatly missed. Richard Carroll Sr. and Jr. was our only father and son team. Richard Sr. unfortunately died a few years ago. He once worked in the Southern Pacific shop in the Ogden Yards. Richard Jr. has been the head locomotive engineer at the Golden Spike Historic Site at Promontory Summit. At the time of this video, he is manager of the steam locomotive operations. We are always happy to have young volunteers join the project. They have to be at least 16 years old. 223 was in operation from 1881 until being retired in the late 1930s. These images are from the later years of operation. The Rio Grande Railroad donated the retired 223 to the City of Salt Lake City in a ceremony on July 24, 1941. It resided on public display in Salt Lake City's Liberty Park with some cosmetic changes until 1979, when it was moved to the Rio Grande Station and put in the possession of the Utah Historical Society. In 1992, a group of volunteers from Ogden made a request to the Utah Historical Society to restore the 223 and formed the Golden Spike Chapter as a result of taking on this project. The locomotive and tender were transported to Ogden on a flatbed truck and offloaded on a short set of tracks set up behind the old Shoup Williams candy factory adjacent to the Ogden Union Station. Soon, 3 wooden narrow gauge cars that were located in an amusement park between Ogden and Salt Lake City were brought to Ogden and placed next to the 223. It was thought these could one day become an operating train set. Unfortunately, a tragic fire destroyed the old candy factory and the wooden freight cars were burned along with it. Fortunately, the 223 cab was removed prior to this, and the remaining metal parts were not damaged by the fire. It came to a point where better facilities were needed to continue our work on the 223. Ogden City renovated the old trainman's building, and we were able to obtain some shop tools such as lathes, power saws, and drill presses. In a moment of fancy, one of our volunteers decided the dingy lavatory needed some sprucing up. He chose to decorate it with Rio Grande colors and 2 gold-colored spikes for toilet paper holders. This photo of a Rio Grande diesel was the model for our lavatory wall design. To inform the public and attract possible volunteers, we open our shop to the public on Saturdays and have signs near or on the shop building. One of our first projects was to begin the restoration of the locomotive tender. We retained the frame, trucks, and hardware, but had to replace the wood beams and deck planks. The tank was too far gone for simple repair, so we began the task of reconstructing the entire structure from new steel. Local companies, such as Peterson Incorporated, provided valuable services in shaping steel plates into required configurations. Thousands of holes needed to be drilled in multiple layers of steel in order for riveting to take place. We used a small forge to heat the rivets, then a team of usually 5 would work together to get the hot rivets into place and hammered into a tight bond. The original water intake housing was rusted out, so a new one had to be fabricated. A special mold was made to form the steel plate. Because the shape was complex, we couldn't find a local company that could handle the job, so improvisation was the rule of the day. Once completed, a hole had to be cut in the tank deck to fit the intake. Another example of improvising was when we used 2 sections of rail with spacing bars and leveling shims to roll the tender outside the shop. The coal bin doors were restored, one old and one new. While in service, the railroad installed wood walls to increase the coal carrying capacity. A stencil will eventually be made to place white lettering and logo on the tender after it's painted black. The air tank, critical for regulating braking pressure, will be installed in a perpendicular position on the top of the deck. While working on the tender, We were also rebuilding the locomotive cab. The original wooden cab was beyond repair, so an entirely new one was designed by our team leader, Maynard Morris. Metal sheaths were installed as the cab will straddle the hot boiler when in operation. After the candy factory fire, the ruins of the building were being demolished and the property cleared. We needed to move the locomotive boiler and running gear up to the shop area where it could eventually be worked on. With the locomotive near the shop, restoration could begin. Before the locomotive was actually moved to the shop, the two air compressors had been removed and were sent out for refurbishing at the cost of around $10,000 each. The headlight reflector was re-silvered and the pilot, commonly called the cowcatcher, was rebuilt and a new coupler assembly attached. The throttle dome on the boiler needed a new shroud around the base. A wood template was made for the final steel form as seen here. We needed to remove all bolts that were attaching the boiler to the frame. Years of corrosion made this a difficult task. Blow torches, air hammers, and sheer muscle power finally got all attachment points cleared. The sand dome needed to be completely removed and refurbished. In operating a locomotive, sand from the dome can be sent by tubes to the rails in front of the driver wheels to create friction if the wheels begin to slip. Large parts removed from the locomotive were taken to a professional sandblasting company in West Ogden for cleaning and priming. Water and air pipes were removed, as well as control structures such as the Johnson bar, which controls steam going into the pistons and the direction of wheel rotation. A major event occurred in April of 2016. We needed to get the boiler and running gear separated. We were fortunate when Wagstaff Crane from Salt Lake City donated a day's service to accomplish this task for us. The boiler was measured at 23,000 pounds and the running gear at 33,000. drive wheels were locked in place due to a bent rod and corrosion, so they would not rotate. We had to drag and push it into the shop bay along greased tracks using a winch and muscle power. With the running gear inside our shop, the process of dismantling it could begin. John Braun and Larry Herrig of the Mammoth Locomotive Works in Colorado donated a day of service to help us remove the drive rods. One of the rods was bent and we had to send it out to a machine shop to have it repaired. The pilot wheel assembly was removed and placed in the back room of the shop so it could be worked on. In order to continue work on the frame and running gear, we needed to purchase a mobile overhead gantry to lift the frame high enough so the wheels could be rolled out from underneath and sent out for professional shop work. We found that a single gantry was not going to do the job, so a second one was purchased so that we could lift the entire frame away from the wheels. It isn't all work. On occasion, we do take a break and treat ourselves to a little relaxing barbecue. The boiler restoration will be a major project involving many thousands of dollars. We will need grants and/or donations to accomplish this work. Many thanks to all the individuals, foundations, and companies that have contributed so far to the 223 project. We have a connection with the Utah State Railroad Museum Authority, which now has a grant writer due to funding from the Utah State Legislature. The 223 boiler restoration is a candidate for one of the first grants being sought. Our current Vice President, Lee Sechrist, is a member of the Authority Board. Our website has a GoFundMe link as another source of income for our project.